This is a production of Cornell University.
Just to kind of frame this, I think that we started with the recognition that we had some shared needs, and we definitely had some needs for new resources here at the county level, but realized that maybe some of those resources would serve on a statewide level. So as we developed our pollinator garden, I reached out to Sarah and said, hey, we have some grant funding. Can we collaborate on curated or interpretive signage for these pollinator gardens? Because I don't know if you all are kind of like us, and that a lot of what we do is what we can print on our printers and what we can laminate on our laminators, and that's as big as it gets and as designed as it gets. So those kind of signs are not. I mean, they're great, but they're not. They don't say, "Hey, this is a garden. This is a learning space. Come on in," and they flap in the wind and they float away. So, recognizing that we had some parallel needs and we could develop these shared resources, I polled a whole bunch of people across the state and said, "Hey, who's doing a pollinator garden this year in terms of your extension duties?" And a number were. And would you like signage? So based on that, we launched into this collaborative process, which, like many other things, sort of took longer than we expected because life happens and then fairs happen and then people go, we're on vacations. And it took a couple of months, but we came up with some really beautiful things. And in doing that, also ended up developing a shared photo library for other extension educators to use as well. So out of it came this wonderful set of products that I'm really excited to be able to share with people. But along with that are the parallel photos that people could be using and the parallel educators' resources that go along with it. So hopefully it's something that you can just pick up for your program and take what parts you need, and it makes your life easier. So was that a good introduction, Sarah?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay. So we are storing a lot of stuff in box. So Sarah, if you want, you could. I'll be your clicker, and you talk, and I'll click on what you'd like me to show. How's that?
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, what you're about to look at is that, like Jen just mentioned, she polled lots of people around the county to say, what kind of concepts do you want to communicate in your gardens, and from that, created draft of text that then I took and looked at and said, I made some suggestions as to how to organize it. And what we did is we came up with 4 different signs with 4 different concepts. And in my mind, do you mind clicking on the Pollinator Paradise one first, Jen?
Sure.
These 4 signs are kind of like a menu of, you could use all of them, you could use one, or you can select the ones that are most appropriate for what you're displaying in your garden. But to me, the Pollinator Paradise is kind of the intro type of sign that kind of gives the why behind, what is the significance of making your home landscape pollinator friendly. And so what you're seeing right now is the graphic layout for that particular sign, and it has like a fun title that Jen came up with, and then it says, explore this garden to learn how you can create pollinator habitat at home. So that's our main idea pretty much for all of the signs, but this one in particular kind of gives the overview. I mean, in the paragraph I won't read everything word for word, but the paragraph following that, cites the significance for why it's important to have pollinators. They pollinate all the plants we depend on for food and for healthy ecosystems. Underneath that, it gives like a nice, just basic, here's what pollinators need. And all of the signs direct people to more information. 3 of the 4 have QR codes, so if people have smartphones and like to use their QR reader to access more information on a website, they could do so. The main idea behind these signs is to really entice people with beautiful images and not look intimidating like there's too much text all jumbled together, but people can kind of pick and choose the information they want to read. So the goal of this particular sign, not only to just, let people know, hey, it's a really good idea to landscape your home landscape with pollinator-friendly plants and also other aspects of it, but also like encourage them to say, hey, you can do this, and even, go to the Xeraceae Society website and you can purchase a neat little sign yourself that says, hey, I'm doing this to make my pollinator habitat friendly. So those are the two main concepts on this sign. And we were lucky that Jen asked people around the state to upload photos that they would not mind us using. So I had like 60 at least images to choose from for these signs. So that was like our main, I just felt like let's celebrate the photos. So
they're beautiful.
Yeah, so I don't know if we should, go ahead. Jen, did you want to add something?
Well, a lot of educators had noted over the last couple of years talking to educators around the state that finding photographs that we have permission to use has been hard. And as we put more stuff on the web, it's more like publishing, and then suddenly we get into issues with, do we have permission to use the photo? So building this photo library was a nice kind of corollary, thing to this, because it's something that we've needed, but how do you ever devote the time to it? Well, the need and having some grant funding towards it is one of the things that helps you do it incrementally. So, yay, we've got pollinator photos. Next, what do we need to collect? So that was really great to grow our photo library that way. So,
and also what was nice about that is that every single photographer, probably thanks to your direction, put their name as the file name, so that it was easy to credit everybody. Without saying, hey, I want to use this, be on the Rebecca image. Can you tell me whose it was so we can credit that? So all the photos are properly credited to the photographers too. So
and that photo library will also be stored on the CCE Shared Resource Library that we've been piloting now for a while, so people can use them as well. So, okay. So should I close this one and open a different one?
Sure, unless anyone has any questions about this one in particular.
Let's see. Let me open the chat pod. Anybody?
This is Joellen. I'm just curious why, when you're listing the reasons the pollinators are in decline, that you didn't include climate change.
Oh, yes, it was in there at some point.
Was it?
Yes, it was, but I think the discussion was habitat loss part of the climate change discussion. You know what I mean? That was in there originally as a point, but then somebody made the point that the habitat loss. There's also it's human that was the issue with the climate change. Would you agree on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it can't be emphasized by saying like habitat loss partly, in part due to climate change. It's not like we wanted not emphasize, we didn't purposely try not to emphasize that climate change is a factor. I think it was more like we just wanted to be like direct about like,
what is
the habitat loss that causes it. Yeah.
Right.
And also just trying to be succinct. I mean, there was a lot of text, and you don't want to dumb it down, but you also want it to be on a sign. You have to be really careful to make sure you put digestible amounts of text that people are willing to read.
Do people feel strongly that it belongs in there? No, you want to be changing a lot, but it came up a couple of times, and that was kind of how comments winnowed it back down to this, because we did try to keep it brief. What do you think?
Well, the other thing is you might notice that underneath the list of what pollinators need, there's a QR code. That QR code leads to a website that Jen created that gives, because there was like a whole like checklist of specific things you can do in your garden. So Jen made this really great web page. I don't know if it's mentioned there or if it could be expanded on there.
Right. Because we couldn't get it all in the signs, and then it becomes an additional resource for educators. That it's a clonable web page that you could ask your webmaster at your association to clone that web page, and then you would be able to add stuff in there that means something to your county, versus having to create the web page from scratch. So, yeah, we could, it is in there, but it could be brought up more. And if you think if enough people think that this is something to change, the other beautiful thing about this is that this is PDF, and everybody has PDF editors. You can edit the QR code, and if there's something really important in your garden that you're trying to highlight, there might be something that you could, there are places that you can put things that make it unique to your garden. So we could look at that too. So Joellen, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and I can definitely see that it's a space issue. I don't consider habitat loss to be directly tied to climate change, which is one of the reasons that I thought it should be in there. But especially if you're referring to it in other places, I think it's fine as it is.
Let's see if we really do, though. You know what I mean? The process of you start with a lot of words, and then you come down to fewer and fewer words, and then you do, in order to make it short enough that people will read it, you definitely lose some ideas. Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if it could just be like right on that last line in the introductory paragraph. It says, many of these pollinators are in decline, especially bees and butterflies, due to habitat loss, improper pesticide use, disease, and climate change. It might all fit nicely on that line.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet it would.
If it would fit, I would say I'd really like to see it in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a person who's, really trying to elevate our climate change interpretation here. That I just want to make sure, it's up to.
No, yeah,
it's change we could make. We're not going to really expand on that in the sign anywhere, but I think this just gives you the why behind it. So I think that's very appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sharing my screen. I don't think I can actually add a comment, but if you look on any of these box things, you can add comments as you use them. Say, hey, great, I downloaded it, or this or that. But you can enter comments. Oh, wait, I can. I can add in climate change in there, and that will be a note for us too. Oh, well, if I learn how to spell. All right.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'll close this one. Is that okay? And then do you want to look at another one in particular?
No, whatever you feel is the order that makes sense in your mind. There isn't any particular order of these signs. I just wanted to highlight that the pollinator paradise was kind of, if you had a small garden where you only had room for one. To me, I felt like we just wanted to have a sign that kind of, was like this. If you were only to choose one, to me that would be the one that would make the most sense. That's all.
Yeah. And then this, I'll pick the pesticides one because we just talked about potentially adding information to, and this one has a spot for adding. And whoops, I gotta see if I can get that little thing on the bottom to go away, but it may not go away while you're looking at it. This was a sign, right, Sarah, that you had some room for additions?
I think it was the all seasons one where people could put their own QR code to create their own plant list. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh no, on this one you can write in on the right.
Oh
or
yeah. Jen wanted a place where people could write a comment or people could leave comments. But there might be a tip on not having to use the latest IPM practices that you might want to say, hey, check out this article. Or you could even laminate an article and post it with double-sided tape or something. But I was thinking gel markers. If these are created, if they're laminated, that's very easy because you can just use gel markers right on top of that black space. But if you get them fabricated, say at FedEx office or Staples, and it's just there's usually a finish they put on it, and the gel markers have been working really well with writing it on there, and when it dries, the rain doesn't really affect it, but it does take simple green or just a cleaning solvent just to get it off there.
Great. And that could be a space where, I think that this is a hot topic often, and there might be something in the news, or there might be a change in pesticide labeling, or whatever it happens to be, or even an upcoming program that you want to highlight. It was a spot where people could keep the space alive. It's a way to change things. Or if you don't want to change it, you could pop something in there. Again, they're PDFs, and all of us have Acrobat, an editor, PDF editor that allows you to go in there and edit things. So it's there. It can be changed a little to make it, work for you.
So we did write up places you could get them made, how you can mount them, just the logistics of what the cost range is. We can go through that after. Is it okay if we go through that after?
Yeah. I just want to make sure we leave enough time for Holly. So maybe actually we'll go through that now. I'll show you the signs quickly just so you see them and how glorious they are. Sorry, Sarah. I think you did an awesome job on them. So, and then the
all the pictures
photographs
we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the idea behind. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jen.
No, you go. Yep.
I was going to say the main idea behind this one is to further build on what pollinators need is to really get into the fact that having something in flower throughout the growing season is very important, and this gets really into specific to emphasize the fact that certain insects really have specialized with certain plants. So the right hand kind of shows how there's specific relationships between sorry, I should know all these by heart considering that I typed this out, but you can see the different butterflies and then what they specialize on. But we also wanted to say that you don't need just native plants that have specialists, that you can also have lots of non-natives if they're in flower that really appeal to generalists too. So we wanted to emphasize that on this sign. And so this is the sign in which there's a QR code that says scan here to view a plant list on our website. And then it says www.typeyourwebsitehere.org. So the whole idea behind this one is that if you have a plant list you'd like to post on your website, here's your opportunity to create that page and then generate a QR code and place it over the QR code we have here. The QR code that's here currently is the QR code for the website above that talks about plants in different regions that are good to plant, like a whole variety of pollinator. So if you don't feel like or don't want to make your own unique plant list, you could just take that text away completely using the Adobe editor and then just keep that QR code that's there. Does that make sense to people? Because that's the one little tricky part that I felt people might have questions on. That's in the manual too. So for people who aren't on this phone call, that's explained.
Okay.
Okay, we should go. Sorry, I know I talked too much. I know we want to.
No. Oh, and then is this the one we didn't look at? Bees are essential. I think that's yep. There we go.
So the focus of this one is just on bees specifically, to explain how they're in great decline and how there's a difference between honey, just kind of dispelling the information that a lot of people sometimes get confused on. What's honeybees versus the fact that there's still thousands of native bees in the United States, but honeybees have, great function here as well, though they're introduced. So it gets more into just why they're essential. Then you talked about the honeybees versus native bees. And then also Jen really felt it would be a good idea to, a lot of you guys have said that, really dispelling the fear that bees can sting you and that you wouldn't want to welcome bees into your habitat, but letting people know that it's mostly social bees that are likely protecting their colony, and that would provoke them to be more apt to sting versus solitary bees. So trying to say, hey, regardless of the fact that they, have a potential to sting, they're very important. So that's why we wanted to dedicate a whole sign just to bees. we wrote just a 2-pager that just says everything we just discussed.
Oh, while we're here, that there are going to be a whole bunch of supporting resources for educators also in a resources for educators thing. So handouts, articles that you could just use on your local newspaper. Somebody shared with us an announcement for a pollinator program, and how they did it. So we shared that as well as a template for someone to borrow from and just, try yourself to do a program like that. I'm not sure that I have it here, but the guide, it's not in here yet, but the guide does go through what you would do in terms of how to print it, right, Sarah? How to print it, what size to print it on, who to get it from, how to mount it, what you need to change. So kind of guide to go along with it.
Hey, Jen, this is Lori. Yeah. One of the things you were asking about is if you could get some feedback on how people are using it.
Yeah.
I wonder if in this guide you put a link to Qualtrics survey, so then if an educator uses the materials, they could fill out how it's being used. I mean, it would be optional, but I think people will be very thankful that you did all this work. It might provide you a little feedback on how they're using it.
Right.
I think I would ask. Why not? Right.
Right. I think we had like a signing in a visitor's log idea on there, but maybe that would be just more instant.
That could be your visitor's log, and also it could be like if you fill out this form, you'll be notified of emerging changes in content.
Right.
Maybe other people have ideas about what would motivate people to just give you a little bit of information about how they're using it or have used it.
Well, I have to say the nice thing about getting a lot of photographs from people is that they want to see if their photographs got used too.
Yeah.
So they're checking it out to see. But, but that brings another question. How do we get to people to know that the resources are there and that they can use them? That's the other thing, is getting the word out. And I don't know maybe I put it out on the Hort listserv and say, hey, come get it. I don't know.
Yeah, and the other question I have is, do you have an evaluation tool?
Oh, gosh.
Or maybe it's coming.
What kind to evaluate? Yeah.
For people who are visiting signs.
Oh, yeah, and in the garden, you mean?
Yeah,
yes, that was one of our hopes to do. Yeah. How do you get people to evaluate? Sarah, maybe you have a better idea. When people come to a garden, how do you get feedback from them?
Yeah, that's always the ongoing struggle. I'm actually right now testing that. Well, I mean, essentially the best way to do it is, if we have, you look back at what your learning objectives are for each panel, and then you ask questions to evaluate whether ask questions to the visitors to indicate whether those learning objectives were met or not. I mean, so one thing you and I could do, Jen, is sit down and say for each panel, say, okay, here are the learning objectives we felt were important on this panel, and then generate some questions that if, an educator has time to ask a handful of people, hey, would you mind taking 5 minutes to answer a few questions? That is kind of a standard way to evaluate.
Right.
Or you can have them fill out a little form. I often feel like it's often more effective. The visitor are more likely to tell you the information you're looking for is if you just they spoke it, because sometimes people are like, sure, I'll write this to fill out the survey, and then they never do.
Right. Oh, that would be an educator would have to be there, right?
Yeah, or a person who's an interview person, like a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I know that, like, I helped it's like a children's garden with some interpretive panels, and we had a little QR code in the bottom that said, hey, tell us you were here and tell us what you liked about your visit. And that was one way that they're hoping they're going to get feedback. The panels aren't up yet, so we don't know if the people have actually done it or not. I always just say, if you really want to get the information, you have to do it in the easiest way possible. So it's like dedicate and 2 hours for an educator to go out there and ask 10 people, a dozen
Right.
people.
Right. And it's probably easier to do on a garden day. Some of you are having garden days, and you've got folks out there, and you're doing programs hands-on to have a volunteer assigned to just kind of wandering and asking, "Hey, would you mind answering a few questions?"
Yeah,
But for
volunteers.
many of us, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say volunteers are the best. Like that's what I'm thinking that I'm going to do for a project that I'm currently working on here, is have a volunteer hang out in our welcome center for a few hours each Saturday and ask people about the exhibits that they're interacting with.
Right. Because we do need that feedback. We put it out there, and we hope that people are going to come visit it. And then we see people wander through, or we know that they're down there, but we don't really know what they think. And Holly wrote some things in the chat window about getting people to how do we get it out. She suggested maybe doing a webinar and or even just recording a webinar. And it could be, or even a recorded PowerPoint that they could use at regular Master Gardener business meetings to let different associations know that it's there, and that the volunteers might be interested then in taking it that next step and getting them printed out and installing them in their gardens, because often we are really, Go ahead.
The PowerPoint might be good for like the first garden who puts them out there to kind of take pictures of each step, meaning like here's the material we printed on, here's how we installed it. It can even be like a little YouTube video.
We're getting there.
That like shows the process.
Yeah, which is another great project, even that for a volunteer to put together. So
because maybe. I'm saying maybe that sounds so wishy-washy, but I'm thinking because I want to use the Pollinator Paradise sign and put it in our pollinator garden. And so we're lucky that we have a construction crew, so I can make a request for them to put it in. But if I can say, hey, can you tell me when you're going to make the sign base, I can go videotape them doing it and then just kind of splice together a little fun instructional, narrative to go along with it.
Right, yeah.
That wouldn't be probably till the spring, but.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's a good idea, I think. It's on the wish list. It could be on the wish list for sure, Holly.
Yeah.
So we took a half an hour. Okay. I hope that gives people some idea of what's out there, what we did.
This is how we're expanding our education in our display gardens here in Oneida County. And one of the gardeners, part of our perennial garden, a lot of people around our area and probably throughout the state are concerned about deer browsing in their perennials. So this is a sign that we have in front of this garden that is made up of deer-resistant plants. And you can see, she said, visit Cornell Cooperative Extension website, fact sheet on the deer-resistant plants. And there's the garden, and our little plaque with that same picture is right there in the center of it. And we also wrote a news article for the local newspaper about it, too, to bring more people out to see the gardens, this particular garden. In the butterfly house, their goal was to provide visitors a place where they can learn about life cycle of monarch butterflies, the types of milkweed plants needed by caterpillars, and the nectar-producing plants needed to sustain the life of a butterfly. Objectives. They post a large graphic display of the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. Plant 2 types of milkweed, common and swamp, and explain with signage the importance of preserving milkweed and what type of monarchs use. Plant and label a variety of nectar-producing plants. Provide a mud puddle for butterflies to use and display recipe for mixture. Display fun facts about monarch butterflies, and you'll see that in my several next slides. Create a brochure that explains how to grow a butterfly garden at home. And their assessment. As visitors exit the butterfly house, ask them to fill out a survey about their experience and knowledge gained, and you'll see our little survey box. And I'll go into that. And we did have the spine soldier bug attack our larvae of our monarch caterpillars this year, and that kind of was devastation to our monarch display this year. But here's the signs they created that go throughout the house. And then that's the life cycle display, and they're looking for a big laminated poster from an educational site that would have the monarch life cycle a little better. These were pictures that we took and one of the gardeners made over the years ago. And there's some butterfly mud pies in the recipe right there. And then take a survey. This is as they exit the butterfly house. And then we have the information box there that we had brochures in about making a butterfly garden and like what plants the butterflies like. And then the surveys are in the info box, and they just leave them right there with the pencils. And here's another sign right there. Caterpillar says sparrow, Chinese eyes do not see. And this was we educated the public because many were coming to see the butterflies and what happened to them. And we had those right on our door posted, an explanation of what happened. And when some kids came, I was out there talking to them, and they seemed to like the explanation, and they learned more something that there's predators to the butterflies. And that was what they we also had some other culprits in there, chipmunks and some mice too. And our pollination garden, and I like how you did the signage for Pollination Paradise. This will tie in nicely with the area in our gardens next year. All American Selections, we participate in that organization. Every year we sign up to receive seeds, which a local high school FFA group starts the seeds for us. And they're annuals and also vegetable seeds. But this year their theme was pollinator education. And we participated in their landscape design contest. And this is how we incorporate the pollinator education into this annual brick garden here. And we had to submit that we have the plants all labeled, and they do provide some labels for their plants. And we had a gentleman who was a friend of one of the gardeners who made up some recyclable water sources that the pollinators could use that were creative. And little sponges in there to soak up a nectar solution that they made. And one of the gardener's grandsons was a member of a Cub Scout or Boy Scout group, and he made a mason bee house, and that was all put in the garden and labeled there for people to see. And there's another shot of the nectar and what is pollination sign there. And then the overall, we ended up creating a mobile. And then we have beetles, butterflies, hummingbirds, and birds on there. And it tells a little more about the different pollinators. And it kind of moves around with the wind. And All American Selections, like how we worked with the different community groups. We involved 4-H'er and ARC School of Work Kids help in the gardens too. And we received honorable mention this year for what they did with the education. And that's kind of how we, this year, have added a little more education to our gardens. And thank you, Sarah, for getting us rolling.
Well, Holly, this is Jen. That is really cool that you worked movement into there. That's really awesome. That moves. People see things that move, and it tracks them. But I saw that Fiona had a question earlier, and I think this is probably something we all would benefit from knowing: is when you create interpretive signage, how do you know what's enough? How many words should be on a sign, or are there any other pointers? I don't know if you saw that in the chat window. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any rules of thumb that you could share.
WebEx unto itself, or a fun presentation. I mean, the quick and dirty. I mean, there's a lot I could say, and I certainly don't want to take up everyone's time, but there's definitely interpretive research about how many chunks of words should be together before people start getting tired of reading it. So I never exceed 75 words. I try to even do a lot less if possible in one chunk of words. And some people recommend, don't exceed 150 words per sign. Now, I try not to do that too much, but I also feel like the key thing about interpretive signs that I feel is most effective is giving a title that gives you the main idea of the whole sign, an introductory paragraph underneath that again summarizes what the sign talks about, and then the chunks of text that are kind of secondary to that reinforce that main idea with clear headings that tell you what you're going to talk about. So that way there's a hierarchy. People could walk by a sign, they could read the title, maybe the introductory paragraph, and they're going to get the main idea you want to put forth. And everything else reinforces and gives even more detail to that main idea. To me, that's the key way to structure an interpretive sign. And again, I assume people aren't going to read everything. I always assume that. So I assume that there's have you guys ever heard of the 3-second, 3-minute, or 30-second and 3-minute rule? Most people are going to look at a sign for 3 seconds. So in those 3 seconds, you're going to get them to read the title and maybe the other headings. The 30-second people might read the heading, the main title, the introductory paragraph, and the main headings to the other places. And then the 3-minute people will, if you really stick to, 150 to 200 words, might read the whole thing. But I give people the opportunity to dig deeper, and the headings, I feel, are the invitations to dig deeper. Honestly, when I go to a museum and I see a whole long paragraph, I'm like, those people didn't want me to read it. It's like they didn't invite me to read it, so I'm not a reader, so I'm a good person to create interpretive signs because I don't even like to read. I mean, I like to read books, but if I'm enjoying a garden, I don't want to have to read a ton of information.
Right, you're moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'd be happy to do actually prepare kind of a presentation on what I've learned in the interpretive realm over the course of my career with just the kind of tips and basics if you guys are interested in that. But to me, it's the key is inviting people to want to read more. If you don't make the effort to try to rope them in by, headings that tell you what they're going to read about, no one wants to read and then process what they just read. They want you to tell them.
Right.
A YouTube video.
Yeah, just 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yeah, because I could give a few examples, and I feel like the pollinator ones, granted we haven't evaluated them with people, but we could, I could use that as a way to what drew me to design it in that way.
Yeah, and then the other thing, which I think you did with Holly and her group that was so critical, is even before you get to the signage,
mm-hmm.
you go through that process of what are the messages or the main goal of this space. Somebody works through that process of identifying their main themes and what Holly was describing. You took her group through is probably critical to getting to that point of where, okay, now I can decide what my title is going to be because I know what I want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's creating what the main theme is for for instance, the Pollinator Paradise. Our main theme was, here's the way you can create a Pollinator Paradise in your garden. And, Jen was really good about creating catchy, fun titles. No, Holly, I just wanted to know what the mobile was made out of. Is that metal?
It's PVC pipe.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Cool.
And was it made by the group? Was it the 4-H group?
Well, I had one 4-H'er and 2 master gardener volunteers kind of help to guide her on it. And and then we laminated and used rings. We had like pull ties before, but now we have like the 3-binder ring type things hooking to the sign, and we had to use duct tape to kind of reinforce it because this fall the winds have gotten stronger up here, and it was kind of tearing it beforehand. But I mean, it was fun to make, and it's nice and light, and we can use it for other things too.
Cool.
And congratulations, Holly. That's really an awesome thing to get recognized, and sometimes we don't do a great job of tooting our own horns, but, that's really awesome.
Oh, no. The gardeners, yep, they do a lot of hard work, and I'm glad they participated in the contest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? This is great. Very informative, actually. I feel like we should have like a workshop on a regular basis for people to share what they're trying and how they're trying it. And as you said, Jen, it was better to do it as a collective.
Yeah.
And then to try to do this sort of thing on our own, because we all have our own, we just only see one way.
Right, and so you get all these comments, and you always filter them through your lens, your lens of what you need and where you are working and that kind of thing. But they open the door to like, aha, maybe we should try that. Or you get these great ideas, like we might steal from Holly now, of having something that moves in the garden like that, So.
Yeah, so it would be fun to maybe this is where Cornell Plantations has a role. We come visit Cornell Plantations for a summer workshop.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Would that be fun?
And I give you a tour of different signs and other types of interpretation besides signs, like creative ways, to. I mean, signs are great. They can be low cost, and they're always there. You can't have people there all the time.
Right.
But there's we've been trying to add mobile tools to give people guided tours of our gardens and.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like other people sharing, like Holly did, and just like Jen and I did. Like hearing the other creative ideas people have been doing too, so people can like build on each other.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention really quickly, because Jen had mentioned how difficult it can be to find images. And the New York State IPM program has a Flickr site, and we have albums specific to pollinators and also bees and wasps. When I was looking at the bee poster, I noticed that you had a photo captioned about how the wasps will collect wood fibers to build their nets, and it reminded me of a photo that I was luckily able to collect showing a paper wasp actually scraping the wood off. So it's good to know that those kinds of things are available.
And Joellen, that was a great sharing. And actually, somebody suggested that we borrow some photos from there, which we did, and credited the photographers. But do you all have access to that Flickr site, or anybody with a Flickr account can see it, right?
I don't even think you have to have an account to see it.
No, you just need to go to Flickr. And our garden-based learning also has a Flickr site as well.
It's not, no, it's not available right now because
Okay.
I think Sarah has a few more changes to tweak, and now we're going to add climate change if we can into that line.
Yeah.
And then that will all go up onto the CCE resource, educators resource sharing site. And at that point, if you would like, I will just add you if you're not already added.
We used to have actual slides.
With a script that you would get in a box in the mail. Yeah.
This is more of a sandbox location. And so what we're trying to get a little more skilled at sharing stuff that we're developing, so people aren't developing the same thing in separate worlds.
Right. Although sometimes, since we are, what am I trying to say? We're developing them simultaneously. That sometimes we end up with this overlap naturally. And it was just because I put that query out to the whole group on the listserv that I think somebody from New York State IPM said, "Hey, we have this whole file sharing site on Flickr." And it was like a wonderland, you know. Somebody opened up the door to Oz in the back, and it was all these wonderful photographs that I just didn't know existed. So it's just throwing it out there and having that casual kind of conversation that we have online that helps make those connections, I think. Great.
Good.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.